This is Access Ann Arbor.
Welcome. My name is Elaine Roman. Our topic for today is Amir family turn their tragedy into benefiting others. I have the honor to introduce to you Mr. and Mrs. Amir. I started working with this dedicated couple at the International Institute in 1984, and later at Access Arab Community Center for Economic and Social Service under the supervision of Nancy Adado-Gray, whom also was a great help for the family. Let us hear the story from the loving parents and tell us, Mrs. Amir, tell us briefly about yourself.
First of all, I really want to thank you, Elaine, for working with us for all these years, for all of your support, and for your belief in our family innocence. The story started when I had, in 1984, where my twin, Samir, was born with a crying to the touch. I had relayed my concern to the doctors in the hospital. They told me that he was a fussy baby, that his big twin, he was born like 6 pounds, 11 ounces, and his sister was born 7 pounds, 13 ounces, and then I shouldn't be worried about him, that he has any other medical issues, even though a lot of nurses who relied their concerns about him being stiffness and crying to the touch. I was discharged 2 weeks after he was born on November the 18th. Of 1983, and then following a week after that, I kept taking him to the same doctor.
How many children do you have?
I had 5 kids altogether. The twins, I had Muhammad Ali, he's my firstborn. Then I had the twins. Then I had my 4th child, Zainab, a year after, and then 5 years after that, I had Hussein.
So your story is about mostly what happened to you with Samir.
Yes.
Death.
Yes.
And this is what you struggled for 27 years.
Yes.
Mr. Amir, can you tell us briefly about yourself?
My name is Ahmed Amir. We got married in 82. We have our child is in the end of 82, December. And in 83, November in 83, we have the twin. And in 86, we have Zainab, my little girl. And they stole her from the hospital on the second day when she had birth to her.
What you were doing? I mean, what kind of job do you do?
I work for Ford Motor Company.
Uh-huh.
I will work for over 36 years.
Wow.
A manufacturer technician. And I was working the afternoon that time when the tragedy happened. And because we started going to lawyer, to court, to meeting, social service with and all that.
I know. It's so hard.
I took a midnight shift, to
support
all the family. And pay for the lawyers, pay for the thing and all that.
Well,
and,
we'll discuss it later.
Yes.
Yeah. And, we'll talk about it in details more later. What happened to Samir? I mean, all your struggle is Samir. What happened? What kind of tragedy? What happened to him? Can you tell us the story?
Well, from the beginning, from 1984, when Samir was rigid and sensitive to the touch, when I seek medical attention for him, I was told that because he was gaining weight, even though he was fussy and crying to the touch, that I shouldn't be worried about him, that he's fussy. But as a parent, you know, you would learn. He wasn't my firstborn. I know I had a child before him, so I would
first
know.
child is really hard to know.
So you won't know. But the second you would know a child, being a mother, you know, there's something wrong with your baby. Even though your child cannot communicate with you, but he can communicate with their crying. You know the difference between as a mother, your child, is he crying from being fussy or is crying from being painful? Samir was crying from being painful. So I did admit him to the hospital by calling the doctor. The doctor agreed to admit him. He was like 3 months and a half, to convince me there was nothing wrong with Samir. As I admit him to the hospital, even the doctors at the admitting room, they were surprised as him being a stiffness and crying to the touch. And as I told them what went on with him from birth, and he was born in Oakwood, and this is what happened. Oh, then don't worry about it. We'll see what's going on. On the second day, we were told that he had 5 healed fractures. He's 3.5 months old, claiming that he has 5 healed fractures at different stages, and then they stopped pointing.
So this is how they accused you.
That's how it happened.
And they took them to the foster children.
They took Samir, and then Muhammad Ali and Suhair, they were at home. They did not take him because there was no signs of abuse to Samir nor to my other 2 children, other than unexplained fractures. And that's when we're trying to look to see if he has some kind of brittle bone disease or some kind of. But as it went on, a year and a half past the incident, on November the 21st.
It was a year and a half after.
Yeah. On November 21st of 1985, as I was bathing 3 of my children, I finished my oldest, Muhammad Ali, and then I finished Suhair, my twin daughter. As I about to start to bathe Samir, the phone rang. My husband, as he said, he started working midnight so he can help pay the support for the attorney's fees. I don't want to wake up my husband as him being, at least maybe he went to sleep around like 4 o'clock in the morning. Around 8 o'clock, I just went to answer the phone, and I heard a loud thud. That's where I went back and I checked on my son. He was unconscious, gasping for air. I just graduated from nursing school. I gave my son CPR, and I called him for my husband to wake up to call the EMS. He did, and then the phone was off the hook, and then the EMS came and they looked at him from outside. He appeared, he doesn't have any injuries, no signs of falling. So they assumed that
no kind of abuse even.
Nothing. I mean, and then as I told them I was about to bathe him, they questioned if he had been drowned. I said, no, my son did not drown. There was not enough water to cover his foot. But as of when we got to the hospital where he was born, I was told he's doing fine. But he's in a coma, but he's doing fine. And then not even 10 minutes later, out of a sudden, I see the police come and start questioning me about the incident. And then they said, then the doctor comes in and says that my son, he's not breathing on his own. He has to be transferred to a different hospital. As he was taken to a different hospital by the ambulance, as I got to Children's Hospital, that was on the 21st of November of 85, I was told my son was brain dead. I could not accept it because I said I was just told he was fine. But they kept me and my husband away from Samir as of trying to be with him, to sleep with him. I stayed in the hospital, but I wasn't allowed to stay in the same room. I would allow in the waiting room. Then my son was pronounced dead on the 22nd of November. We buried my son on the 23rd of November. And my Muhammad Ali and Suhair, my 2 oldest, Muhammad Ali, he was like 2 weeks short of his 3rd birthday. Suhair, she was a twin to Samir. She was 2 years old. My mom lives next door. As I went to the cemetery with my husband and his brother around like 8:30 in the morning. As I came back around 10 o'clock, 10:30, my mom was very upset, crying. She was recalling how the police and the Department of Social Service came and raided the house.
They took the other children.
Yeah, my Muhammad Ali and Suhair were at my brother who lives on the upper flat of my mom, who have the 2 other kids the same age as mine. According to the police report, and then they said, you know, all Arabs look alike. Which kid should we grab? So I mean, they called on my children names, Muhammad Ali and Suhair, and then as soon as they called on Muhammad Ali, I was told he hid behind the couch, and Suhair went under the couch. She recalled that my mom the kids were crying, they were calling on me to help them.
So there is no kindness for the kids. They took
Nothing.
them and
they took
left.
them, and my mom, basically, she really came down to the police's feet, and she kissed his feet to leave her grandchildren, but the state refused. As my children, they spoke no English at that time. A week later, we were allowed to see them. My children were, for the first visit, you could see the bruises on them. They were traumatized. As I was explaining to them in Arabic, as my son was asking, why are we here? I was really yelled at by the social worker telling me not to speak to them in Arabic because she needed to understand.
What a cruel way.
And then I told her, my children, that's the only way they know how. And she said, no, you need to speak to them in English or we will terminate the visit. I had no choice but to explain to in a language that my children did not understand. And my children were traumatized. They were prevented to be placed with any family, with my parents, with my husband's parents, with their aunts or their uncles. They were denied any placement with anybody. They just, even though there was no signs of abuse to Samir from the early incident to the second, but they just focused on admission of guilt, even though there was evidence that my son had a brittle-bone disease. And my son was tested at age 4 months. And the test, according to 10 years later, that the test came back that Samir had a brittle-bone disease and he should be returned back to the hospital for further testing to point out what kind of disease he had, if he could be treated or not. Now I go back and say, that's why the reason why the hospital and social workers prevented us from getting any record on my son, on my kids. And then 2 months later, on February the 6th of 1986, I was charged with second-degree murder.
Wow.
And then I was pregnant with my 4th child. The Department of Social Service, as well as the court, stated that the Muhammad Ali and Suhair would be returned home upon Mrs. Amr acquittal. If she was found acquitted, then the children should be returned home. I know in my heart, God is my witness, I did not hurt Samir. Nobody had abused him. As a parent, I found my son, he was calling for help. I felt my son, even though the doctor said I should be happy not to hold my son, because I told him the only time he cries when he's touched, he said, you should be happy. As a parent, I said, if I'm going to hold his twin sister, my daughter, and Muhammad Ali, wouldn't my son feel that he's unloved by me? So I could not seek medical help for my son. When I did that, they knew my son had a brittle-bone disease, and they covered it up.
Yeah.
And then with following the death of my son, they knew that my son with his brittle-bone disease, any kind of incident, doesn't have to be taken to the extreme fall for him to because if I had known that my son was diagnosed with the brittle-bone disease, I would never think of me to go to answer the phone, let alone to turn my back on him while I was in the bathroom. But as I was acquitted by a jury, 10 minutes after the doctor testified that my son had his injury, skull fracture, was so severe that could never happen as an accidental fall. But at the same time, there was no injuries to say that my son had been abused or he has all the injuries that the doctor said he needed.
So because it took 27 years, so you were accused and you were acquitted.
I was acquitted on August the 13th of 1986. And I said, and then even the judge, I mean, the jury embraced me as if I was their own daughter. When I was acquitted, found not guilty, not even of negligence, I stood myself and I told the judge when I was found not guilty, I told the judge, I am guilty. I said, I am guilty. My son died because I turned my back on him to answer the phone.
Yeah.
Then the judge said to me, she says, Rehab, it was a freak accident. You did not go and speak on the phone for anything. The phone was off the hook. The investigator investigated the call. The call came in at the time that you said there was no conversation. The phone was off the hook. But it's an accident. It's a tragic accident. Now you're pregnant. Good luck with your kids. You'll get your kids back. But the guardian ad litem was in the courtroom. He had a bunch of papers in his hand. He said, his name is William Ladd, and I am not shy to say his name. He says, over my dead body, you ever see the kids or place them in any home of their familiar surrounding? I said, why? I was acquitted, and I should get my kids back. And I was pregnant with my fourth child. As of the court now, we're in a court of probate court.
As if the tragedy for death of your son is not enough for you, and all these, I can't believe how you handle all these things. How the children adopted?
As far as I can, this is when my daughter was born, she was taken from the second day after her birth.
Tell me about your fourth child. I forgot to ask you first.
Zainab was born on December the 9th of 1986. As I told the doctor when the baby is born, I want it to be tested, even though I did not know back then that my son was tested for forbidden-bone disease, and the test came positive. But I knew there's something is wrong, and I just thought maybe if there is, it would be something with her. According to the report, the state came in on the 10th of December. They had it wrapped, and then first, before they have her wrapped, they came in. My husband was with me in the hospital room. The state came in, the social workers, a letter stating that we have a hearing for Zainab to have her removed. And my husband says, you can't do that. And so we called the attorney, and the attorney says to bring the paper. As soon as my husband left the room, and then all of a sudden they had my daughter wrapped, and they asked me if I want to say goodbye to her. I did promise my daughter, she was only 1 day old, and I did promise her that I'm not going to give up on her. But the blessing that what happened, even though she was taken, she was put in a really good foster home. Zainab, she was put for first 2 years in a good God-fearing foster mother for the first 2 years. And even though the foster mother, she testified that the state coerced her, they want her to testify against her, they want her to say that Zainab have nightmares so she can get more money. She refused. Even she was a foster parent with them for over 15 years.
What a brave foster mother.
God rest her soul. Her name is Bernice Canap.
And the other one?
The other one, she abused. My children were abused. They came in with all these bruises. Weekly visits with our kids. They had cigarette burns, belts marks on their body. You can see the fingers on their faces. Muhammad Ali, now he speaks English. He's 5 years old. So here she's 4 years old. They verbalize after their abuse. The only thing the foster worker would say, Muhammad Ali, you're a liar. So here you're a liar. Your foster mother doesn't do these things.
Tell us about the adoption. How your children got adopted?
As far as this is what is so confusing, because almost like when our wives were terminated in 1989, basically because I did not admit killing my son, not because I was unfit. They said because I was found innocent. Not even one doctor that we were taken to says that we're not fit parents. On the contrary, they said we're fit parents. It would cause more damage to their children if they were to terminate their rights. But the judge and the state made up their mind. The only way I can get my 3 kids back, I have to admit to killing my son. I refused, even though
you have the right.
Because I did not kill my son, and I refused to raise my children with me, believing that I killed their brother so they would fear me. I wanted to do what's in the best interest of my children. I did not kill my son. And then she's not going to make me believe that this is the only way.
So they adopted them against your will and without any agreeing with that.
We did not. We gave when our rights were terminated, we gave them the names of relatives. And then the names of our relatives, their uncles and aunt, were investigated. They said that you're fit to adopt any other children, but not your nieces and nephews. And then we kept on fighting in a court of the appeals. And then when we exhausted our appeals, we kept on going. And then we learned from another family who went through the same thing, who really helped us and called the hospitals to get medical record. And that's how we found out, like 10 years later, that my son was tested with breeder-borne disease and it was positive. Not only that, my daughter, who was taken from the second day.
This is why you exhume your son from the.
When I exhume, when this is the what I'm saying is, when not only my son was tested, even my daughter Zainab, she was tested, but she was 6 months old, and it showed that she had genetic abnormality and old heel fracture, and that was for her being in foster care. And then after all of that, we exhausted our appeals. When we got the evidence to have to reopen the case, and we were in '95 before Judge Amy Hathaway, and she was ready to reopen the case basically on my son had breeder-borne disease, but the state refused, and that's when they said that the kids were adopted. And I appreciate that you were present with us at that time. And even though the judge, she said she did not believe that the children's best interest to grow up with the fact that their brother was killed. When the state admitted that the children, the two older children, went to therapy for 6 years, 7 years actually, to believe that the brother was killed by their mother. And now that was the guardian item and the prosecutor and the social workers to the judge telling, Your Honor, it's not in the best interest of the kids to believe that the brother wasn't killed by their mother, because they already have accepted the fact. But then to exhume Samir's body 14 years later with no visits, when our children became of an age and 18 years old, we tried to contact them by a friend of my son's. After the media got hold of our situation, and then we found out where my children at.
So you exhumed them, and the doctor said that there is no any accident. It's not abuse. It's accident.
I exhumed my son's body, Samir, after my daughter, my twin daughter, and even her foster adoptive mother, when she said that she said that Suhair. On November 18th, she would have memorial service, believing that her brother was killed. She cannot be, and then she believed that her brother had a breeder-borne disease. And then all of a sudden, her foster mother, adoptive mother, she told Suhair in front of me that, Sue, you were never gonna get on with your life until you will. Her exact words, you were never going to know what happened to Samir until you meet him in heaven. So Suhair took that into a sign that to not accept that Samir had a breeder-borne disease. And that's what she told me. She said, I would never going to get on my life until I go to heaven and meet my brother.
That's why you exhumed
I exhumed my son's body to set her free, to let her know she didn't need to wait so she can die. My children's innocence were taken away. And I said, if you took my children away and you stole their innocence, I'm not going to let this happen to another child. I buried my pain. I did not think about the pain that are the mother and the father and the suffering that they go through. I thought about my children's pain. When my children's innocence were taken, they were brainwashed to believe that God loved them to be taken away from me. My son, 22 years old, was interviewed by CNN in 2005. Literally, he was told that God saved us and loved us to be taken away from our birth parents, that their brother Samir had to die in order for them to be saved.
I know it's very emotional, but we have so many questions. Tell us about your son, Hussein.
Hussein was born in 1991, 5 years after they happened, even though my attorney said if they found out that I'm pregnant, they will take Hussein, as they did with Zainab. Even though with Zainab they had no law, they kidnapped her. What they did was against the law. But with Hussein, because when there's a termination, the state has a right to all of your children. I hid in the basement, not showing that I have a child.
So you hide him all the time.
He was hidden, as of knowing that he was my son. He was known to others that he was my nephew, in order for me to protect them from not being taken away.
And how much you spent money all the time?
Approximately all 25 years, close to $850,000.
Wow, 800.
I work a lot of overtime.
You know,
and I have a,
yeah, and it's it's very hard story to hear too, but we need to. I mean, a lot to talk about it, and it's. I don't know what to tell you, but we have to. But what about the law about the
Amir
Graham?
law, in 2005, after we exhumed Samir's body, we went back to the court, and the judge had ordered Wayne County to amend my son's death certificate. 22 years later, the death certificate classified accidental homicide.
Okay,
And then
I think we have to cut it off, and you really dedicated the loyal parents for almost 3 decades. Now your hearts did not stop loving, your tears did not stop flowing, and the fight to regain your children never stopped. Your faith, love, and patience gave you the strength to protect your children and others from other tragedies. This tragedy is the creation of Amir's family. How can I say it? You protect families from falling apart, from injured and taken to the system. And you did a great job for Michigan Amir Law 4118, which was signed into law in December 14, 2010 by our former governor, Jennifer Granholm. You can help by calling your representative and ask them to get on board to go sponsoring HR 1102. 11102 to ensure its passes into national law to protect all voiceless nationwide. Thank you, Mr. Amir and Mrs. Amir. You gave us a clear, honest picture about your tragic story. Thank you, Mr. Amir. I want to say I have been working with you for 27 years as a social worker and as a support. I admire you as a caring, a dedicating, and loving father. And you, Mrs. Amir, I know you have suffered a lot as if God sent you to help other children. If I was to choose the Mother of the Year, I will say Mrs. Rehab Amir. Thank you for watching, and thank you, CTN, for the opportunity. I really want to hug you, Mrs. Amir.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.